Morning, everybody.
Morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Hey guys.
Hope reminder to sign in. Just a reminder to sign in on the usual link. And this doesn't look like the order is going to be a little different here. So our first item up, like I said, Rich is going to go over the GIS project information. I've got an agenda item about an incident in Boulder County that I want to make everybody aware of, and Tracy's got some information on that too. And then we'll get into the normal issue tracker and everything else on the agenda. So sorry, I'm going to skip around a little bit, but thanks, Daryl, for presenting that. And Rich, the floor is yours.
Great. Let me bring up my presentation here. Okay, so it says disable share. It says the host disabled attendee screen sharing. So probably should have tried it right before. Is there someone out there that can adjust that?
Try it now, Rich.
Great. Looks good. All right, let me get the right screen up here, please. There we go. Can you see my screen okay? Should say GIS routing for Colorado.
Yes.
Okay. So hey everybody. We are today. I'm going to go over a brief presentation, but anyone who would like to please stop me. I can't see the screen, so if there's a question or a note, will somebody, Tracy, can you read it off to me or stop me here
Yep.
because I can only see my presentation.
Okay.
So the goal of this presentation is kind of tell you where we're at with Colorado right now. We are taking a dramatic step forward with next generation and a move to, what I say is a move towards I3. It's a big portion of I3, which is GIS routing. So I'll kind of tell you where we are, where we're going here, and what the process is going to be over the next month or so to get us kicked off and start bringing this stuff live in March as much as we can, and we'll continue to go until everyone's ready and satisfied. So we're excited to move this forward. Personally, I've done this in multiple states across the country and in Lumen areas. It's been very, very beneficial. So this is a really exciting. Again, I live in Colorado, so it's exciting for me and my family as well. So look forward to bringing this capability.
Hey, Rich, do you mind pausing for just one moment?
Sure.
Person who just joined with phone number ending in 1329, can you identify yourself, please? I think *6 will unmute you if you're having trouble speaking. All right, Rich, go ahead.
Okay. And you folks are seeing the full screen version of my presentation, not this like half screen preview, correct?
Yes.
Okay, good. All right. So agenda again. Try to. I don't necessarily need to run through this quickly, but I know we have a lot on the agenda, so I'm going to go relatively quickly to save some time. But stop me at any point. Just want to go through quickly what is currently deployed for NG in Colorado now. What is GIS routing? What we need, Lumen and Intrado need to from the PSAPs and the GIS authorities in Colorado to support this, and the next steps. So I'm not going to go through every one of these, but generally speaking, I've showed this a few times on a few different calls. This is the overall infrastructure for the Lumen Intrado NG system for Colorado. We have our aggregation sites today that we both talk to the individual telephone companies with. We also, Lumen has gone through and done interconnectivity with all of the OSPs and converts that to IP, so the calls come in the IP to the system. All of the equipment within our core infrastructures, what I would say is I3 ready. We use this infrastructure with other states within the Lumen territory, and we do deploy I3 in other states. Right now, the tariff isn't, I3 is not on the tariff. I think that's what we're going to move forward over the next year and get I3 and all the additional capabilities of I3 on the tariff. But the cores are ready for I3 and are processing I3 traffic in other areas. But it's all the next gen I3 capable systems. What we're going to do here with GIS is we're going to use some of those systems to bring us forward, kind of a dramatic quantum leap forward. But all these systems and cores are diverse and redundant within the infrastructure. Once a call comes into the infrastructure and gets processed, we send it over our redundant links to the PSAP. I think everyone's aware, obviously, that Lumen's going through that network project, creating more additional redundancy and diversity within the infrastructure. So that's all being upgraded and updated in parallel here. But we do have, and just to state, we do have a next-gen I3 capable system in Colorado that we're currently on. What we're currently doing today is what we call IP selective routing. So we're still using ESNs. We're still using MSAGs. It's still a static route. So when either a telephone number or a pseudo ANI comes in, there's an ESN associated to that telephone number or pseudo ANI, and we use ESN to route it to the appropriate PSAP. What we're going to be moving forward here very quickly in the next couple of months is for those OSPs capable, which are primarily wireless and VoIP, if and when they send in an XY that is an accurate XY, and I can go into that a little bit later, but if it is deemed as accurate, we will plot that XY. We will find out which PSAP boundary it falls into and then route that call based on that location sent during the call versus that static ESN that we do today. I went through that relatively quickly, but any questions on that?
Rich, the lack of a C in infrastructure is poking into my OCD.
Say it again, I'm sorry.
The top of your slide is a C missing in infrastructure is poking into my OCD.
Oh, I'm sorry. I will fix that for next time. Okay, so what is GIS routing? So what we'll do, it's a couple different things. What we do in our system is that these trunk groups, these IP trunk groups that come in from carriers and from Lumen, we go in and we activate those for GIS routing. And what that actually means is when we get a call over that trunk group into the infrastructure, it'll key us to use our transitional databases because we're not at this point I3 in Colorado. So what we'll do is we'll query our internal location database for location information. If that call is VoIP or wireless, we will then extend that query outbound to that VoIP or wireless carrier or their third-party provider. So for instance, if it's Atmo, we'll go to the Intrado Mobility side because they manage that for Atmo. Or if it's Verizon, that's done through Comtech. So as the call comes in, we identify that trunk group as a GIS capable trunk group. We'll go out to the wireless carriers or VoIP carriers third-party provider to ask for real-time data. When that data is returned, we look at a couple of things. We look at did they provide, there's a couple indicators within that response. Is it a phase 1 or phase 2 legacy kind of identifiers, but is it a good XY that can be used for routing? And what is the radius on that XY? So the radius is the measurement that the wireless or VoIP provider gives us to tell us how accurate it is. Right now, we worked with wireless carriers over the last bunch of years and found that 160 meters really is the cutoff point. So if it's 160 meters or less, we use that for routing. It's going to be better than phase 1 cell site and sector, so we're going to use it. If it's greater than 160, or if it's a phase 1 address, or they don't, or the information isn't available to us, we will fall back to ESN routing. So ESN routing is always there for a fallback for us. What we're seeing here, and I'll show you some statistics in a bit here. What I used to say is we see anywhere between 60 and 80% a success rate for GIS routing. What I've seen lately is more closer to 70 to 80%. The wireless carriers keep on increasing the capabilities and the accuracy and the technology in their systems, and we're seeing a lot better responses, more accurate responses, and more often. So we're seeing, generally speaking, when I look at states now, they're above 70. I'll still go back to my old methodology, 60 to 80, but what we're seeing really is 70 and above now. So that's good. So 70+% of calls have accurate XY information. We're able to take that XY. We then plot it within something called our ECRF, which is emergency call routing function. That's a NENA I3 term. It's a server with all the PSAP boundary information on it. So as long as the PSAP boundary is loaded for that particular XY, then we will indicate what boundary it falls into. That indicates to us which PSAP we need to send it to, and we send it there. If, for instance, we're in this process, and this process probably take, I'm guessing 6 to 12 months to get everybody on. But if we're in the process where it falls within an area that we don't have a verified boundary yet, then again, we fall back to ESN routing. So even if we get the XY, if we send it out to our GIS database server, there is a PSAP boundary, great, we'll use it. If not, we fall back just to the way it works today, which is that IP selective routing using ESN. I think I went through all those piece parts. We will use, and I'll get into this in a slide or two, we will use the spatial boundaries given to us by the PSAP or the GIS authority for that PSAP. The option here in the tariff is that if that's not available, if the PSAP or the GIS authority for the PSAP does not have boundary information yet, what Intrado does. So we manage a whole bunch of different things on other sides of our houses, and we do have PSAP boundary information. So if the PSAP doesn't have it but still wants to move forward, we'll give you the version that we have for verification. If you verify that, then we'll load that. If not, if you want to wait, I know Colorado's going through a massive kind of GIS overhaul. There's a third party that's going to go do seamless boundaries for the entire state. They'll be available then. Our suggestion is move the GIS the information that we have is good, and if you're verifying it and it looks good to you, that we use it. The sooner we get on GIS routing, the better. It really does help us out in a whole bunch of different ways. It's better, faster information. It would reduce transfers, and I'll put this in parentheses, misroutes. So for example, if the wireless carriers themselves aren't doing GIS routing before they send it into us, or they may have dated information, our information will be better and be able to route it appropriately. So I would strongly suggest moving forward with GIS routing as long as the information that either you're providing yourselves or that Intrado is providing to you is valid. I would strongly suggest moving forward with it. These are the new piece parts that we're using. So the spatial interface up top there on the right, ECRF, the location database, we use that today, kind of after the fact. Once the call gets to the PSAP, you bid the location database, which is ALI, but we're now using that before. So again, we use that as kind of an aggregation site to do our queries out to our VoIP and wireless providers. So when a call comes in through the BCF to the ESRP, we'll go out, like I said, to the LDB, query the wireless VoIP carriers for the location information. Once it comes back, if it's good, we'll send it out to the ECRF to plot, find a PSAP, route it to the PSAP. I'm not going to go through this in too much detail, but what the piece parts I want to point out are the spatial interface. So part of getting the the spatial information, the GIS information into our infrastructure, into that thing called the ECRF that's used for routing, is another term, a unit term called a spatial interface. The Trado name for it is the EGDMS. But this is the function within an I3 system. Again, we're not going full I3, but within an I3 system for PSAPs or GIS authorities to send their GIS boundary information through. So as part of this process, I'll go through it in a little bit more detail in a minute or two, is we're going to send out a questionnaire. The PSAP or the PSAP's GIS authority is going to fill it out and send it back to us. And then we're going to work with them on training. We're going to work with them on configuration of the spatial interface. This is the interface that allowed that GIS resource for the PSAP to send in the boundary information. Once it gets into that spatial interface, we do our QA, QC checks, validate everything works and there's no major errors or overlaps or gaps or issues with the GIS information. And then we go ahead and send it through to the ECRF for routing. When we get to I3 in Colorado, it'll also send it to something called a location validation function, which is up top there. And that's what the carriers will use when they're going I3 to pre-validate their location information before they send it into the infrastructure. So we're using, for GIS routing, we're using it for validations, the spatial interface for validations, and then to route that information to the ECRF that's in our production infrastructure that's actually the database that's used for routing. And as we roll more features or functions in for I3, and that'll, again, I think over the next year for Colorado on the tariff, then we'll use it for additional things like updating the LVF. On the left-hand side, you'll see a couple different things that we need. So I'll go into this in a little bit more detail too later, but really what we need for GIS routing is a PSAP, a boundary. That tells us for VoIP and wireless, it'll give you a boundary for your entire PSAP of what you want the boundary to be for calls to be routed to you. That's what we need to move forward. There's other layers for GIS information. One is street center line. I have that as optional. Another is dress point. I have that as optional. And another is response polygons, which are like police, fire, EMS. Those are not applicable until we move forward to I3. And I'll speak a little bit more about each one of those in a minute here. I'll stop for a second because I am going fast. Any questions right now? Okay, so go a little bit more into the boundaries. So there's a bunch of layers that we eventually we'll have on the ECRF to satisfy all of I3 needs. For the GIS portion, we only really need one, which is that PSAP boundary, that boundary that designates what the area for answering for a specific PSAP is. The fire law EMS, that comes later. So just as a preview for I3, ESNs and telltales or ELTs go away. And the police, fire, and EMS boundaries are actually loaded into the system. So if you want to query what police, fire, EMS, you actually query back through the system and we maintain boundary layers for each of those. That's not where we are right now. Just to reiterate where we are right now is we're changing how we route. We will be changing how we route calls, how we make that routing decision, but the delivery to the PSAP is exactly the same as it is today. There's no changes needed on the CPE. It's just how the infrastructure is making the intelligent routing decision to get it to the PSAP. But what it gets to the PSAP, the format, the specification, all the protocols are the same exact of what they do today. So we're just making the decision based on GIS. We'll still send it to PSAP. The PSAP will still have an ESM. They will still have ELTs. It'll still look and feel like it does today. No changes on that side. That fire law EMS boundaries don't come until I3. And I3, there are some significant changes of how that call and what the protocol is used to deliver it to the PSAP. And that's when CPE changes and upgrades and updates will be needed, but not right now. The street center line, that is another layer. So this has all the different roads and streets there, and it gives a range of numbers for the roads and streets. It's important for I3. And the reason being is we use those for the wireline addresses. And when we go to I3, where we have different policy routing options like special event, or you want to carve out a certain area to route somewhere else, it becomes really important to have wireline be part of that, because all the intelligent GIS routing decisions are made based on wireless VoIP and wireline. Right now, for just GIS routing, if you have street center lines or address points, we will absolutely take them and we'll start geocoding your wireline records. But because because wireline records are static and use ESN today, there really isn't. It's not going to make a big difference for just routing of the call for wireline today. So if my point being is, if you have the street center line and the address point boundaries, great, send them to us and we'll get started on that, and we'll do the wireline part. But it really, for this portion of GIS routing, because wireline are static and ESNs work pretty well, it's not crucial for us to move forward. We don't have to do GIS routing for wireline because it really won't change the end result. But if you have the information, send it to us and it'll help us get started for I3. So that's that. What's next? So the tariff's complete. It's out there and active. What we're going to do again for this, we're at a point where it's GIS routing only.
Hey, Rich,
So
you had a hand up.
Oh yeah, okay.
Sorry to interrupt. Kimberly.
No.
So thanks, Steve. Rich, you mentioned send it to you. Are we going to have a portal to upload our GIS data and with some format specified?
Yep, I'm getting there. I'm sorry. So yes, so that couple of different things. We're gonna have and let me skip to that slide real quick. I think this will answer it, Kim. If it doesn't, we'll circle back. So the process is Tracy's going to send out this initial questionnaire. So the questionnaire, and I'll show you a snapshot of it, really just asks, okay, do you want to participate with this? If you do, great. Do you have your own GIS boundaries, or would you like to validate ones provided by Intrado? If you don't want to participate at all, please tell us why and when you will want to participate. Once that questionnaire is filled out, it's going to be sent to our GIS technical project manager, Caroline, and her name and contact information will be on the form, and she'll start kicking off the process. What she'll do is we'll immediately start provisioning that spatial interface for you, and she'll give you all the information you need to start moving forward. We'll also have monthly training meetings on what needs to be done, from both what information we're going to need to be provided, as well as training on that application of how to send in the GIS data files. So that spatial interface configuration will be completed, and then we'll give you training on how to use that spatial interface to send in the data. And once it's sent in and we turn you live, that same spatial database will be used for any updates or changes to that data. And then she'll work with the individual areas on provisioning, configuration, and validation of all the data as well. So the initial questionnaire will come from Tracy. The individual PSEPs will need to figure out who their GIS authority is, who's managing this from a GIS perspective. They'll fill out the questionnaire and send back the information to Caroline, and then Caroline will start interacting with them to get them configured on our system and get the data. The plan is to, beginning of March, is whoever's ready to go, we're going to turn them up. So we'll turn, if we have, let's say, we have 20 boundaries validated prior to March 1st. In the beginning of March, we'll get those turned up, and then every month, whatever is ready, let's say March 1st, we get everything turned up, and then from March 2nd through the 30th, we'll work on getting more configured in the system, and then we'll turn those up every month, we'll turn up the next batch of PSEPs until we're done, if that makes sense. And then I'm going to come. So Ken Van Hout, most of you probably know, he's the technical project manager for our A901 solution in general. So he'll be coordinating all the technical aspects of, we have to go in and enable those IP trunk groups to turn it up. And then once we get the first batch of PSAPs, he'll work to get that loaded into the system. He'll work with Caroline to get that loaded into that ECRF and get them live. And then every month there'll be additional more that we go ahead and turn live. We're going to enable all of the trunks for all of Colorado prior to the initial deployment. So we won't have to do that anymore going forward. It'll be, once we do our initial turn up, it'll just be enabling additional PSAP boundaries every month after that. And then my responsibility, I want to come back and circle around with you folks to show you some kind of cool new things. This is, I talked with Jason Horning in North Dakota. This is North Dakota data, but some of the new things that you'll be able to see through your tools, you'll be able to get reports using the standard reports that are available through the ESInet stuff today. You actually have this IEN voice event counts by routing reason report, but ECRF routing isn't on there. It will be now. So as soon as we turn those up, as soon as PSEPs, we have the boundaries loaded and we're doing GIS routing, you'll be able to get additional data from these reports. The top right one is a standard report that is available to you today. I pull that data, you can download that data and run your own kind of reports. I did that for North Dakota for the state of December this morning, and it shows that North Dakota right now is actually at a 77% rate, which is amazing. 80%, it pretty much tops out at 80% because of the technology restrictions, the handsets that are out there today. We're never going to see much more than 80%. So 77.77% is pretty amazing for North Dakota. And that's for the entire month of December. Over on the left-hand side, this is through our CMP. So if you folks, I've gone through this training a couple of times. If you don't have the call trace functionality on the CMP tool, you should request it if you want it. It allows you to see, because we're doing that GIS query prior to the routing now, it'll let you have there's a lot more visibility into the system. So because we're doing that query out to the wireless and VoIP providers to get that location information, and that location information comes back, if you can see on my screen here, I blocked out some of it, but you would see the whole latitude and longitude. You'd be able to see the radius that was provided. You'd be able to see the cell site phase 1 type of address on there as well. So that's all, will all be available to you real time for any call that comes into the system. So it's pretty cool additional feature functionality. And then finally, this is a snapshot. I think our goal, Tracy, here is to get the finalized version of this out this week. Tracy has a good list of all the PSAP folks. And again, those PSAP folks, maybe they're the GIS authority for their area, or maybe they'll have to send it to somebody else who's managing the GIS data. But that's who this form will eventually need to go to, will need to be filled out, and then returned. On the bottom there, you can see Caroline's contact information. The other additional form there is our data provisioning roles and expectations. This tells about all the formats that we need, the different layer information, and Caroline will go through the of what's truly required from just a GIS routing perspective versus what will be required with I3. This document on the right-hand side has everything we need for I3. And because we're just doing the GIS portion of it, we won't need all those piece parts, but she'll go through that on the training. And then that's it. But fire some questions at me. We're really excited to get this going. I think we have a good path forward to get a whole bunch live quickly. So yeah, we're looking forward to it.
We got a couple questions. Kimberly.
Thanks, Steve. Rich, at one of our meetings, it's been a few months, we discussed about using the net, the 911 net, to have the data posted up there. And I say the data, the boundary deliverable back You were going to take that and do some follow-up. Do you have an update on that for us?
Yeah, I thought that we did follow that up. We can only send it to the one place that we put in the tariff. So that because these systems are not interconnected, the 911 net system and our spatial interface system, there's not a way to do it that's not time and cost prohibitive. Um, if that's something we want to look into maybe over the next year, we can still provide it to one source, and I think that source would then distribute that. And I forget where we landed on that. If that was Jennifer at the state was willing to do that.
It was, but then that's when I asked the question of why couldn't the one source be to post it up on the 911 net for then it's one place, one location
Yeah,
as a file download, and then those GIS authorities could get into the 911 net and just download that file. So you're only doing a
right.
one step, one location up on the 911 net in that file download.
Yeah, it would take, I think, literally tens, if not hundreds, of configurations to do that on the 911 net today because they're not interconnected. Changes would have to be made to every one of those profiles. So at this point, Kimberly, that wasn't an option for us. We can continue to talk about it, but to be able to move this forward and to be honest, just getting a copy of it out is non-standard. So then, so this, that wasn't incorporated initially. So we were able to agree to getting one copy out to one source, but to be able to interconnect these two disparate systems, we weren't able to commit to that at this time.
The next question, Daryl.
So Rich, I'm 99% sure I know the answer to this question already, but I just want some confirmation. Whether or not a PSAP is on a legacy PSAP gateway has no impact whatsoever on your ability to geospatially route a 911 call. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yep.
Thank
All
you.
the delivery to whatever solution is at the PSAP today will continue exactly the way it is today. It's just the internal, whether or not the system is using a static ESN for the routing or whether it's using GIS information is all internal to the system. But delivery is the same exact way it's being done today, which is why this has been successful in other areas that maybe weren't ready for I3 or didn't or CPE ready or tariffs or something wasn't ready. So we were able to gain this huge benefit of I3, which is GIS routing, without having to change how it's delivered out to the PSAP.
Rachel?
Hi there. This may be a question more for Caroline when we get going after the questionnaire comes through. But number one, what do you anticipate being the feedback loop for between Intrado back to the GIS authorities and then from the authorities back to Lumen? Will it be the spatial interface itself?
Yeah, so that's how, you'll be able, Caroline is at your disposal for any questions. So she'll be your representative for your one-stop shop to go to for questions or clarifications. But the data path will be, once it's established, will be the PSAP or the PSAP's GIS authority inputting information through that spatial interface tool. So it's a web-based tool. We ask on that questionnaire if you already have a key fob with us, which you probably do if you're already getting 911 net and things of that nature. But yeah, all the data would be submitted through that tool. Any critical errors or information data, you'll be able to go out to that application and pull that information down. So that's the path, the data path will be that spatial interface application. But Caroline's your representative or your resource for any questions. So she'll be the person you work with.
Okay, and then secondly, does any of this include the functionality of GeoMSEG? Because not all GIS authorities are using
Nope.
GeoMSEG.
It does not. These are things that we're going to talk about. And one of the early versions of the tariff included that one-time GOM-SAG and all of that, but that kind of fell away when I3 fell away off this version of the tariff. We will be including that in the next versions of it. For now, it's using the same MSAG you use today. So it's whatever MSAG's established now will continue to be used. But there will be options in the tariff going forward to create a GOM-SAG. So take your GIS information, your road center line or address points if you have them, and back into a GOM-SAG and basically create a new fresh GOM-SAG. But that's not part of this part of the tariff. That's coming soon.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thanks, Rachel. Any other questions for Rich? All right, hearing none. Thank you, Rich. There's a lot packed into that presentation. We appreciate it. I've made a note to add to our agenda for the January meeting if there's any follow-up questions after people digest that. And if you could provide a copy of the presentation, we could send it out to the group.
Sure.
There's some great diagrams that you had in there, and some people might be on phones or smaller screens. They might want to look at it closer.
Great. Yeah, we'll put that out there. I asked the only somewhat sensitive information I thought was North Dakota, but I talked to Jason Oring and he was okay with sharing it. So it should be the full presentation that you get.
Cool. Thank you. Appreciate it, Rich.
Sure.
All right. Back to the agenda. I'm going to throw a third one in here for next one, just to speak a little bit about an incident that we had at Boulder County, and then we'll get into the issue tracker. I want to make the group aware of a situation that we faced, or in mid-November. I received a call, and so did one of my staff members, from a vendor that was asking to gain access to complete or to continue working on the diverse circuit to bring it into our building. There was some work that was completed up to a certain point. They ran into some physical issues with conduit that's buried, and long story short, we had to pause for a little bit till we figured that out internally, and another vendor had reached out. We weren't aware of that vendor coming on site or wanting to come on site to continue with the work, but after some conversation, we accommodated to them, knowing that there's a lot of logistics involved. That individual was cleared. They had to make entry to our data center to get visual on some of the connection points. During the encounter or during the interaction with my employee and the vendor, while they were in the data center, my employee smelled alcohol on the individual that was coming to do the work. That was brought to my attention and my division chief's attention, and we immediately got a marked unit involved. So deputy came over and completed a law enforcement investigation, and that individual's suspicion of alcohol consumption was confirmed by the deputy. During that interaction, that individual, or prior to, had reached out to someone else from their company, likely to let them know what was going on. And two more people from that same company showed up, one of them being a tech to replace the individual that had originally come to do the work, that was confirmed to have alcohol on board. And that second individual, during their interaction with the deputy, was also suspected of consuming alcohol. So the law enforcement investigation was completed. That company and those individuals were asked to leave, and no additional contact with them on that day was made. That was during the situation. I brought it immediately to Tracy's attention as our single point of contact for any work being done, both letting her know that we weren't aware of this work being done, and then, of course, the more egregious situation with the alcohol consumption of not one but two individuals from the same vendor. She assured me that they were going to take care of it, and they were taking it seriously. Later that day, I had conversations with Cindy and Tim too. So it was quickly brought up the chain, which I appreciated. The following day, we observed that same vendor showing up on our property, even though we had asked Lumen to make sure they know that they're not supposed to come and do the work and complete the work. And I had to have face-to-face with that same vendor, different people, but well, one of them was the same, but the folks that were suspected or confirmed of consuming alcohol were not there. It was different people with the owner of the company. And I asked them to leave. During that interaction, I observed another vendor, a different vendor, starting to get work done to do some splicing. And again, I walked over to that separate, unrelated vendor, also working on the same project, and asked them to leave too. The interaction with both were super cordial and professional. And the reality is, we were never notified of the second vendor coming in also. So again, I brought this to Tracy's attention. And the deputies from the day before completed their investigation and reports. That's what I wanted to share with the group, but I also wanted to give Tracy an opportunity to speak to how Lumen handled it, so the group understands the totality and kind of the closure of it.
Yeah, I can. And then I have a few folks, I'm the first person to hear about it. And then, as Steve mentioned, kind of pass it up the chain. So I know there's some other folks on that might have more information for us. But, initially our process, whenever we hear something like this, we have an internal, and I shared this with Steve, we do have an internal integrity hotline that is for employees to reach out to if there's anything concerning. It can be with a manager, a supervisor, an employee, or something that comes from a customer. And this is definitely one of those measures where, I felt like more people than myself and Cindy Barry should know about it. So what we do is we report it to a team within Lumen, and they do an investigation just to follow up with sometimes the customer, of course, the vendor. Just do a thorough investigation. Steve, I did go in and reference my case number, and it is still showing open, but there wasn't any details attached to it. It means they're still working on it. And when I initially called in, I asked a lot of questions because this was my first time ever calling them, and they did say they keep these open for 30 to 45 days. So it's not uncommon that it's still open. It doesn't mean that anything is completed or not completed. It's just, I think they keep it open for X amount of days. So at the same time in doing that, I did reach out to Cindy Barry and let her know, as well as her boss, whose name is Wayne, and Tim Kunkelman was aware of it also. And then, we worked internally with our teams. Cindy reached out with her supervisor to, it's called our vendor escalations team. They work with our vendors directly, let them know what happened so that they could take action on their part. We did share with them that we did not want that vendor assigned to do work for Lumen again. And we were told that would happen. I think it was probably timing as to, we let them know that day. And then, as Steve mentioned, the next morning the company showed up again. I think it was just a timing issue where our vendor didn't have enough time to reach out and say, by the way, don't go back to Boulder. But we have been assured that they're on the list now not to do any work for us. And, as far as communication about the other vendor, we've tried to work on that. I know there are several PSAPs that I talked to multiple times about, hey, this vendor's coming out to do splicing. Will you give them access? Or they're coming out to pull fiber. Will you give them access? So I have heard from some folks that the communication as far as who's coming on site is flowing as it should. A little bit difficult sometimes when you're working with a third-party vendor but they all do things differently. So we have made the request, please let me know so I can let the PSAP know, or make sure the PSAP knows that you're coming. We have shared with them that there's a good chance they'll be turned away if you just show up and no one knows you were coming. So they understand that. And like I said, I'm more than willing to be the person that calls you and says, hey, can somebody come out on December 14th? But at the same time, the vendor has to take that step to call us first. So it's still a work in process, but I know there are several sites where the communication is coming either directly from the tech on site or from me schedule timing and try to keep the communication as crystal clear as we can. There's a lot of steps in this, and sometimes, you know, it's going to be 5 or 6 visits to your site. And, you know, that's just part of what this project is about. But I know it's improving. I don't think it's perfect, and there's still going to be some misses. So if you do have someone show up on site and nobody was aware they were coming, call me. I can verify what they're doing there. Or like I said, we have told the vendors, if you're not going to give notifications, some sites are going to turn you away.
I wanted to ask if there's any questions about the situation, either for me or for Tracy and CenturyLink. A question was brought up to me individually about, oh, Kimberly, go ahead.
I was just going to ask if the vendor's name can be shared.
So I did talk to our team, and I know my regulatory folks did as well. And that is not information that CenturyLink can share. It wasn't anyone that we work with directly, and we didn't send them. So we have we don't have that information to share.
So Kimberly, I can add to that. I have received permission through my sheriff to share that information because of the situation that presented and the risk it presented to really the entire ecosystem. It was a vendor that was 4 or 5 deep from CenturyLink, and the name of the company was Wire Brothers. And again, I share that at the permission of my sheriff, who ultimately is involved and oversees the law enforcement investigation, and his concerns with a vendor making those ethical decisions of sending people that may not be the ones who should be doing the work.
Thanks, Steve.
Any other questions about the situation? Well, I'll reiterate to the whole group that I think it's really important to make sure Tracy is communicating, or you're getting the information from Tracy, and if you don't, call her, like she just said. Somebody showing up to do the work for any project that you're not aware of, reach out to her. She's been quite accommodating with those phone calls, even through this situation. So we need to know who's on our site and doing the work, and then also reiterate how important it is to escort your folks. I feel like this is a pretty egregious example, but it is something that came up in observation from my employee, which I sincerely appreciated making that call. And it turned into something we never want to see. And overall, it's guided us in a better way to deal with vendors. But make sure they're being cleared and approved by your agency policies, and then they're also being escorted so these kinds of things can be brought to your attention. If anybody has follow-up questions that may not be comfortable, please reach out to myself or Tracy. I know both of us are willing to chat and speak to answers. And then I will give the floor back to Tracy for the next thing, which is issue tracker.
Fantastic. Oh my, I need to make my screen much, much bigger. Old eyes. Okay. Couple things on this one. Let me see. All right. Network performance project. Hold on one second. Pull up on my screen real quick if you guys don't mind. On this one, I know we're doing the network performance project statewide, but this one is specifically for Estes Park. We did work with Kimberly and got some information from our vendor as to what was taking place at Estes Park and why, but we didn't get enough details. So on our side, I know Steve and Kevin have gone back to the vendor and requested additional information. Kimberly, I sent a note out yesterday, both to Steve and Kevin, and copied the vendor contact just to see if we had an update yet. I will do that again on Friday so that hopefully we can get the additional detail needed and pull together another quick call to talk about it. But as of yesterday, I had not gotten anything back.
Yeah, Tracy, just for confirmation, it's Steve Deloche, right?
Yes.
Since there's lots of Steves involved.
Yeah.
Thanks.
I know. I had the same problem this morning trying to help Rich with the North Dakota. I have multiple Jasons to work with as well. So yes, thank you. That is Steve Deloche. The next line item is specific to AdCom, and I'd like to see if there's anyone from AdCom on the phone, because from my team here at Lumen, they have said that this is completed once AdCom ports their numbers. And I haven't been able to get an answer from AdCom on that. So I'm leaving it open, but if we have somebody from that location on the phone that can let us know if it's been done, that'd be great.
Tracy, this is Jeff. I can talk to that a little bit.
Yes.
I've been working with them. We ran into a challenge with the last bunch of numbers that they wanted to be ported. And
Okay.
those are with, excuse me, with bandwidth. And so they're getting me the billing information. As soon as we have that, we will go ahead and put in the request to have those ported over. And that should complete that particular project.
Okay.
So I'm hoping to get that response back today. I will get the case submitted to have those numbers ported. Seeing today's Wednesday, I don't know that we'll get the porting done this week, but I'm hoping next week.
Yeah, usually takes them a couple days, but
yeah.
Cool. I'll make that update. Thank you. I was copied on and heard from Matt as far as some ECATS reporting issues he has. He's continuing to work directly with the Entrado and the ECATS team. This is an item that is on the meeting that Entrado and ECATS have. Usually Jennifer is on that call as well, and I have been attending just so that when tickets are open, they don't drop off before they're completed. Jennifer wasn't available yesterday, and come to find out the lady from ECATS was not available either, so we did not have a call. It will be rescheduled for next week. And again, I really just attend to make sure that the tickets aren't being closed without being solved, right? Because it wasn't going smoothly, so we've changed the process a little bit. So this is definitely on the list, as well as some of Jennifer's other topics for ECATS. The next one has been on here for a while. This is the Wesco. I know you guys continue to work directly with Andrew. Examples get provided. We had a couple changes within our NOC, so I know some personnel changes have happened as well, but I don't believe that we're ready to remove this one yet, unless someone from Wesco or Andrew has a different decision.
No, this is Andrew.
Alex. Oh,
Yeah,
go
go
ahead,
ahead,
Andrew.
Alex.
From Wesco, this is we haven't seen new examples recently to continue investigating it, but it is a very intermittent issue. So we'll keep it on just until Andrew and his team have confidence that whatever issue was causing it is resolved.
Yep, that was going to be my recommendation.
Perfect. We will leave it as is.
Tracy, we got a hand up to Jeremy.
Hey, this is Jeremy with Pickens County. We're experiencing a similar issue, but we're able to narrow this down. And so I know this was discussed back in the May-April timeframe. The Verizon transition from an S7 TDM circuit to SIP. We are late to the game on that transition and just rolled over here this last November. And we immediately started noticing that we were not getting alleys on Verizon calls consistently. What we would get is just a no record found itself. And so working with Entrado and the Verizon team, yesterday we went through a handful of testing and inevitably had to roll us back to the S7 TDM circuit to get consistent alley. We were not able to create the issue, or we were able to create the issue, but we're not able to create a rationale of why. A phone would call in and there would be a no alley record. The same phone could call in again and get an alley record. And so we are scheduled to set up a meeting with Motorola as well and get everybody on the phone and kind of work through it with our phone vendor and everyone else. But I'm curious if others are seeing a lot of no record founds in their alley reports themselves, and if we are able to correlate that with potentially this conversion.
Yeah, thanks for that, Jeremy. And I did actually put that on line item 8. I put yours separate because I was made aware of that a couple days ago. And to your point, the OSP team within Lumen is looking to set up a call with all parties involved. We do have a Verizon contact ready. We have Entrado available. Of course, I can get anyone you would like or we need from Lumen. I think what we were looking for to help schedule this call and troubleshoot and do some more testing is a contact from Motorola. And I only have one, and I don't know if he would be appropriate to be on the call, but I certainly can ask for a contact if you don't have a specific person at Motorola.
Yeah, we've got a ticket that we're working through with Motorola as well. They've engaged, and I've reached out yesterday in that process. But what we're kind of curious about is if this is a wider scale process or problem, or if people have been able to correlate this issue itself, or if it's just unique to us. But it was definitely something in that conversion from that S7 to SIP that we immediately saw it. I've reached out to a handful of centers and it's been hit or miss. People are seeing things, but they're not able to correlate whether that's potentially a Verizon or not. So they're kind of starting to monitor and see. But I wanted to ask the group if we've noticed in that transition a lot of no record found. I ran some ECATS reports just from the raw data side just to kind of see how frequent it was, and I was kind of surprised at how many we're getting.
Jeremy, this is Alex from Wesco. I'd like to talk with you after the call about some stuff. Ours might be a slightly different, but I've also seen some recently that kind of fit the description you're talking about.
Perfect. Sounds great. I can let you know what we're looking at and kind of the testing we've done. And then again, we're going to engage Motorola in this process and hopefully figure out where that is. Verizon is telling us that it's feeding into the network the exact same formatting. So really, it should be we should be receiving those alleys, and we're just not. So we've got to work through it.
Okay. And if other folks do experience any issues with this, let me know. I mean, this is managed by another group within Lumen, but sometimes they, we all work together and we want to get them called out on this tracker, and they're always willing to join this call or any other bridge to talk about it. It's a small group that are doing the OSP migration, so let's keep them on this tracker, and then if needed, we can pull that group in as well. Okay, try to quickly go through these projects for you. We all know about the network performance project. This is just, I don't have a whole lot of updates on this one. It's ongoing. Working on the communication. I've been sending something out every Thursday to kind of give people a heads up as to where you're at on your site. If any of you have anything specific that you want to know, feel free to call me. I'm actually going to have a conversation, I think it's with Denver 911 right after this. They have a new program manager that's going to be seeing this project over, and just to kind of discuss what it is, briefly talk about the tariff and kind of where we're at with their particular PSAP. So I'm happy to do that with any of you guys. We do get information Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from our vendor, and Tamika puts that into a tracker for me, so I usually can go up and give you guys updated information per site. Just keep in mind, it is a stepped process. So right now we're just working on getting both circuits to each location. Once that happens, I'll be engaging Entrado, and we'll start at the beginning of the year activating these circuits, and then that will be followed by decommissioning the DS1s. So work in progress. I know the communication is getting better, but if you guys, like I said, individual questions, let me know. I'm happy to pull up the tracker and take a few minutes and explain the project to those of you that don't know what it is or just have questions. Middle mile portion, that's what Tressa and Tim report on quarterly, so that we'll be giving them information at the end of this month, and they have their deadlines to meet for that. We're keeping the phase 1 and phase 2 on here. This is really something that's led by Paul Brown and team, but I will be the person that filters questions. So as they get information, I'll put it on here, and if you guys have questions, I will push those up the chain of command as well.
Hey, Tracy, Carl's got a question.
Yeah, Tracy, this is Carl at Garfield County. Is there any update on getting diverse circuits here?
Jeff Winkleman, I'm going to have to call you out on that one. I know for Garfield County, we did resubmit the quote for a different vendor circuit. Do you know the status of that? Or can you and I check later?
Yeah, we can take a look at it later. I don't want to hold things up here, so I'll find out.
Carl, I'll be the one that calls you back. But let me go look. There's some of the data I don't have access to, so I need to work with Jeff.
Okay, thank you.
Project management fees. I don't know if we want to leave this one on here. We did share the details. Basically, the tariff calls out hourly program management fee, project management fee for anything that is not part of the tariff. Prime example is to one that I'm working on is when we're doing carbine migrations, right? Jeff is giving each location kind of a bucket of hours. This is what we think it's going to cost. PSAPs are individuals signing off on that, and we're managing the project based on the amount allowed in the tariff. So I don't know if there's additional questions or if this needs to stay on here, but the number one question was, when will these charges be assessed? And it really is, if it's not specifically called out in the tariff. So like the carbine example, right? You won't be charged for ESInet, you won't be charged for ECATs. It's not going to be additional fees for any of the GIS because all of that is called for in the tariff. So can we move this one to close then, Stephen?
Any objections? Question, Michael Berry.
Is the PUC on the same page as that? Is that CenturyLink's interpretation, or is that been adjudicated or agreed upon?
Hi, Michael. This is Daryl. I'll just say that we have not adjudicated this or agreed upon it. And I will refrain from stating whether or not I agree with that assessment, because what could happen is if CenturyLink were to charge a governing body or a PSAP for services that the PSAP or governing body feels should have been part of a tariffed rate, then they could file a complaint. And then the commission would have to adjudicate that complaint. So I'm in the possibility that could happen in the future. I will refrain from providing an opinion one way or the other.
Thank you.
Anything else?
Any other questions related to that?
Okay. New Mexico call transfers. So this is moving along. I have a list from Kathy or Jennifer on the PSAPs that border Colorado, New Mexico. We are almost done with the Entrado contract as well as Motorola. So I will be reaching out to those PSAPs at the beginning of the year. Our goal is in January or February, do some testing between the two, the New Mexico folks and the Colorado folks. And then March, April timeframe is when we hope to close out and have call transfers available between New Mexico and Colorado. New Mexico, and Colorado, just like we completed with Nebraska last month. So that one is good news that it's moving forward. It took a while, but multiple contracts and multiple agreements, it just took some time. But we're very close. And for those PSAPs that this will impact, I'll be reaching out to you at the beginning of the year and trying to set up some time to do test calls. Don't have a lot of updates on the Wyoming side. We've talked about this before. It's technically feasible, but there is a cost for the Colorado-Wyoming project to take place. And until we can get some commitments from both sides, there really hasn't been a lot of movement on that one. We're doing some star code cleanups. That's something Jennifer is going to communicate with you guys. And I think I saw it on the agenda. I don't know if there's an update coming, but I have provided everything that Lumen and Entrado has. As soon as we get confirmation from Jennifer on which star codes to remove, we will get those deleted and cleaned up for you guys.
Yeah, Tracy, Daryl's going to cover that for Jennifer later.
Awesome. CGIS requirements, this one, I mean, we'll leave it on here. We haven't gotten all the results back from the survey that Jeff created and sent out. So we're still continuing to follow up on that. That's going to help us, understand what is required at each site. And then the ECATS rollout is still down here at the bottom. I will send out another reminder to the handful of locations that do not have ECATS working yet. This is something that, it's available to everybody, and for various reasons, I think there's still 10 to 12 PSAPs that do not have it activated. I can happily share that Sterling is going to be up and going soon. We have a pretty big project going for Logan County right now, and I just confirmed with my technician on site that he has the RDDM racked and ready to go. So it's just a matter of scheduling the turn up with Entrado, which I'm hoping to do before the end of next week. So that'll take Sterling off the list. Anything I should add or any questions based on the overall projects? Okay. We do have Carbine Mech and other moves on this sheet. We've talked about that before. I have updates to Carbine, but I will have to rely on the rest of my team as far as Mech and PSAP moves go. But if we want to touch on any of those, we certainly can. I know for Carbine, the only one I have in progress right now is with Grand Junction. And Carbine has asked us to put that cutover on hold until the beginning of the year. So as soon as they're ready, I'll re-engage Kenneth and Trotto and we'll finish up there. The rest of them, I did just receive information from Jeff about the Westminster Broomfield agreement, and I'm going to, I do need a document to be sent over to Entrado to kick off the project with them, but I'm planning on getting a kickoff call scheduled based on Carbine and the PSAP's availability. I'd like to have the kickoff call before we all exit for break, but if we can't, I'll make sure it takes place right at the beginning of January. So those will be the next two that I will be working on. The rest of them, we just have to wait for the paperwork, really. And I know the mech moves, again, don't have a whole lot of updates on that one. Crawley is close, and I haven't gotten any information on other locations. Anything else for me?
All right, thanks, Tracy.
Yep.
Next on there is actually, Tracy, you're on there, GIS project info. Is that covered? Has that
That
been
was
covered?
Rich, I believe.
Okay.
I don't have anything in
Okay,
addition.
so then call routing. Daryl?
If I can get myself off of mute. So I am reading this from an email that Jennifer sent since she couldn't be here today. At a previous ESInet users group meeting, some members requested a flow chart to help visualize the different types of 911 call routing. Jennifer worked with Rich Johnston of Entrado to develop a flow chart, which I will show you in just a moment. Actually, I'll show you right now. A flow chart. Hopefully that's not too small for everybody to read. The key thing to emphasize on the flow chart is that alternate routing and abandonment routing are two different types of routing. But if the PSAP desires, they can route to the same PSAP, the same alternate PSAP. So they can both go to the same place, but they are two different kinds of routing. The PSAP would just need to work with Entrado and CenturyLink to say they want their alternate and abandonment routing list to be the same. The alternate routing happens automatically without any kind of intervention from the PSAP. That includes rollovers, or if the network simply knows that your PSAP is not available due to a fiber cut or any other thing that makes your PSAP unavailable. Abandonment routing requires manual intervention by the PSAP to happen, such as activation of a PSAP abandonment device, or a call to the Network Operations Center to initiate the abandonment routing. Manual in the moment routing can occur when a PSAP calls the NOC and gives direction to route to something other than the pre-built alternate or abandonment routing path. The Network Operations Center has to create that path at the moment, which takes a little bit of time, so it's not as quick as the pre-built rerouting. But it also affects all upstream and downstream rerouting, meaning that if other PSAPs have routed their calls to, let's say PSAP A routes their calls to PSAP B, but PSAP B has manually had their calls manually rerouted to another PSAP, the PSAP A's calls will no longer follow the alternate or abandonment routing. They will then go to the manual reroute that PSAP B put in place. This will most likely result in calls going someplace other than expected for those upstream PSAPs. It also has the potential to overwhelm the downstream PSAP. This action should be undertaken with caution and communicated in the moment to all PSAPs within the routing chain of the affected PSAP. And I know that's not always, PSAP B, if they manually reroute their calls to another PSAP, they may not even know that PSAP A has rerouted their calls to them at that moment. But this is why it's necessary to stay in communication if there's a major event going on and you do any sort of manual rerouting. With that, and there's a whole explanation page on this graphic as well, and I believe we will be making this graphic available on the ESInet Users Group's web page in the resources folder. With that, I can try to answer any questions based on my understanding, but again, Jennifer put this together, and I want to, she's not here, but I want to praise her for doing such a good job on this because I think it's really well done and very easy to understand. Does anybody have any questions? All right. And then Steve, if you want, I can just roll over into the star codes.
Yep, that'd be great.
So the other item was a star code list, an updated star code list that Jennifer's been working on. Jennifer wants to thank all of the centers who got back to her to pare down their multiple star codes into one per agency. The star code list will be sent out to the ESInet Users Group after the meeting. We will not be putting this one in a public-facing folder, so this will not be going on the ESInet Users Group's webpage because that's accessible by anybody. But we will be sending it out to the governing bodies and PSAPs after today's call. This list is alphabetized by PSAP name, but it's also in an Excel spreadsheet, so if you want to put it in any other sort of order, you can. Jennifer is asking that all of the PSAPs update their records and their speed dials. At some point in the future, probably a date in late January, which will be announced, Intrado will delete the old star codes. So it's imperative that PSAPs update their records and begin using only this star code list. If you see any errors, please let Jennifer know as soon as possible. Any questions or concerns? All right. Back to you, Steve.
All right, thanks. Actually, I'm going to kick it back to you to at least switch to the performance report. We missed that after the issue tracker. So Tracy, do you mind jumping in and talking about the performance report?
Sure. Sorry, guys. I'm convincing myself I'm not getting sick. All right, this first one, I did see a little blurb there on March 8th. If you guys recall, this is just the network performance, kind of checking the network, constant pinging the servers to see if they're available. I double checked on this one. It doesn't set off any alarms because it just continued to ping that server on November 8th until it hit it. Could have been the server was busy, some reason it was offline. That this isn't anything really that draws up an incident or anything on the Lumen side, just because it's constantly going and pinging the server. As long as it reached it, that was a successful day. Let me see what's next. I think MOS by PSAP. This is a chart or a node that is checking voice quality. We want to see something above a 4 or more, and all of these are right at 4. So nothing real exciting to support here, just that the voice quality is what we expect it to be. The next one, instead of showing it by PSAP, it's showing the ECMC route, basically Denver and Miami. Again, this doesn't cause any alarms unless we dip below the 3.5 or 4, which is what the tariff is. So these are all right at that 4 line. We look at the packet loss percentage. This also is ECMC route. We are looking for something less than or equal to 0.5. And this actually is running, I don't know, it started, I think it did October 31st is that first line, and then it goes through December 1st because it looked a little off to me. They must have changed the way they pull the data, but this one didn't ring any bells for anyone on the knock. Nothing came through on this. Jitter is a little bit different.
Hi, Tracy.
Yeah.
Just a quick question on this. I know these are all under the threshold amount in the tariff, so I mean they're all within tolerable limits. But I'm curious why the ECMC route to Denver would have more packet loss than the one to Miami, because it looks like that's pretty consistent that the one to Denver's always seems to have more packet loss.
Let me just write it down real quick because I will have to take that back and ask. I get these metrics passed down to me, and unless they fall outside of the tariff, they don't come with an explanation. But I think that's a legitimate question, and I can take it back and ask my NOC to take a look. And I'll send them like the last couple months if we've seen it, not just for November, but I'll go back a couple months and see if there's more.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
I'll ask the NOC on that one. The next chart, we talk about it. I wish I had a way to make this show correctly, but because it's such a small amount, remember that we show this in microseconds and the tariff calls for milliseconds. So less than or equal to 20 milliseconds is what we hope to see. And again, everything fell where it should for the month of November.
All right. Thank you, Tracy. All right. Public comment. Anyone from the public? Oh, we got some. Tim, go ahead.
Hey, thanks, Steve. I just wanted to bring up a couple of things that we're working on, if this is appropriate time to do that. So I know we're working on the current network improvement plan and implementing that, and Tracy covered all those things, but we are working on the next one. It would be due in February of the coming year. And so one of the things that we're working on, kind of going back to what Carl raised about the rifle location, we're gonna put bids back out for locations that never responded the last time to anything other than our connections. So we're gonna see if we can get anybody to look at some of those locations that didn't fall within the current project. We're also going, though, we figure there's going to be a number of locations that we're still not going to get any sort of response. And so we are going to go back and look at another opportunity to diversify really all the PSAPs, but certainly those PSAPs in particular. And we're going to do that through some third-party opportunities. I know folks have heard of a carrier called DeGero in the past. We're going to kind of reevaluate that. But now that folks like Starlink and Kuiper, which is the Amazon solution, are in the market, we're going to look at our relationship with those entities to see if there's some ways that we can utilize their services as a way to diversify. One of the limitations historically with DeGero is it still does rely on assets that are already in place on the ground, and so that may not necessarily solve a situation. And so that's kind of been the hesitancy historically of that particular solution. So anyway, we are looking at that, and we want to bring something to the table with those, certainly with those locations that are currently outside of the current project, and then see if we can even expand it to maybe even just being tertiary connections for those that do have a diverse connection or will have a diverse connection. We are also looking at some additional interoffice paths to improve, like we've got a few right now. And so we're looking at those. We're working with some additional third parties to try and see if we can come up with some solutions for at least a few locations to not only just diversify that PSAP, to help diversify the wire center that PSAP's in, but even further create large scale rings that might enable more than one PSAP. In some aspects. It could be 3, 4, or 5, similar to kind of how the Burlington, or excuse me, the Cheyenne Wells project out on the Eastern Plains is really going to create a ring that there are about 8 or 9 PSAPs ultimately that could reach some benefit from that. So we're looking at those projects. We do intend on getting some folks together, all of you folks together, to review some of the things that we've been finding and what we're working on, provide a little extra detail on that. And then with the hope of meeting the February, mid-February deadline to submit the next plan. So I'll stop there, see if anybody has any questions. I guess also we would look out, we'd look at if anybody has any suggestions, we'll take those immediately. So yes, basic questions.
Tim, we've got a couple hands up. Michael Barry, you raised your hand at the same time Tim did. Is it related to responding to Tim or something separate?
Something separate.
Okay, I'll hold on you. I'll come back to you. Daryl.
Yeah, I just want to say, I know project management has been a big concern with the ongoing improvement plan. I wanted to just kind of put this out there that when you do have these meetings with the local 911 authorities, and this is a message for the 911 authorities, they'll be participating in those meetings as well. That might be an opportunity to talk about ways to put some guardrails around that and some expectations around that for the next improvement plan, and include that as part of the application. This is between CenturyLink and the authorities that are the customers, but I think when you have those meetings and start negotiating what's going to be in that improvement plan, that would be a good opportunity to have that conversation.
I appreciate that, and that actually leads me to the next thing, which is we are still working on that overall tariff cleanup. Now that the state has advanced past E911, we have a lot of that language still in there. And then things like what you just mentioned, we wanted to incorporate that. So yeah, either it'll be part of that or point taken there, and we can incorporate it as part of the improvement plan filing in general, not necessarily tied specifically to it, but just to resolve that issue. So one way or another, yes, that's one of the things that's coming up for some of the things we're trying to work on. One more thing, and we wanted to let the GIS project begin, and so today's that day, and now we want to, once we didn't want to take away any energy from that process, but we do want to then go back to filing those optional services that we've been talking about along the way with GIS. So that'll be another filing that we want to make. We'll do what we did in the previous, which is, sit down with folks, try to hash out some of the things, then put a marker in the ground with the commission, and then continue to work out any issues that we might have with some of the language, if we haven't already done it before when we file it. So that'll be another step coming your way. Probably still be a month away from that. Well, the holidays coming up, it does take away some of the resources that we and others have. So, but that is on the horizon as well. So I wanted to throw those few things out there.
All right, Tim, thanks. I'm going to throw a question at you. I'll loop in Jeff Winkleman also from a recent email string between the two of us. Jeff had reached out to me to request a time to discuss with the EUG, and obviously we only have a few minutes left. It may not be today, but he wanted to make sure that we can hold Lumen accountable. I appreciated that offer, and he wanted to talk about establishing a threshold for requiring mandatory escalation. And I think about our current situation or the most recent one here at our PSAP. But I don't know if Jeff, you want to expand on your request, or I would also ask Tim, could this, the answer to Jeff's question with some conversation amongst EUG members, could that also be something that could be included in the February filing?
I don't know if Jeff's got anything, but we do have some language in the tariff that talks about an escalation process. We could probably look at that again and see if there's some additional detail that could be included in the tariff itself for that.
This is Jeff.
Yeah, go ahead, Jeff.
I was going to say, you and I maybe can take this offline and talk a little bit more about it. Steve, the reason that was on there, it came up on one of the previous meetings. I believe it was the task force meeting during the summer. And we want to make sure that it doesn't fall off the radar. And the question was raised as far as the mandatory requirements. So it was a vague statement, and I want to get more clarification around it and continue the conversation to make sure that we have some structure around it. And I think starting, Tim, you and I probably should talk about that to see what's in the tariff. And then Steve, maybe you and I can regroup and talk and then bring it back up potentially next month.
Yeah, that sounds great, Jeff. Just holler at me. We'll talk offline, and then let's add it to the agenda for the next EUG meeting in January.
Okay.
Okay. Any more questions for Tim before we get to Michael? All right. Thank you, Tim. Michael.
Appreciate the time.
Thanks, Steve. I just wanted to mention an issue that Summit County is having in case anybody runs into a similar issue. 2 weeks ago, on November 26th, we lost the ability to transfer any of our 911 calls. After a week of opening tickets at every level we could and the different levels pointing fingers, we finally were able to get a CPE tech to take a look at our system last week. A week later, it appears, the latest information we have, it appears to be a change at the SBC on the ESInet side that was blocking our transfers. After some reboots and 911 outages, as of this morning, we are able to transfer again. However, in the words of the tech, they don't know why. So we are still following up with that and trying to determine what caused it so it doesn't happen again.
All right, thanks, Michael, for sharing that. Appreciate it. Any questions for Michael? All right, any additional public comment? Jackie.
Can we get Michael's issue on the tracker?
Yes.
Thank you.
Steve, does someone have any other details they can send to me, like a ticket or an email string or something that explains what the issue was?
And Michael, can you follow up with Tracy offline with some of the details?
Yeah, I can send those multiple ticket numbers.
Okay, just so I have something to put in the comment section and follow-ups. Thank you.
All right, any other public comment? All right, everybody. That concludes, I believe, Daryl, that's the end of our agenda. Just to confirm, since it's not up in front of me.
Yes, it is.
All right, great. Well, everybody, I hope you have a wonderful holiday season. Have a great time with your families and your colleagues, and we will adjourn and see you in January.
Thanks, everybody. Merry Christmas.
you.
Happy New Year.
Thank you.
Happy
Happy
holidays.
holidays.